Hi, good morning and welcome to the ZP Developer Zone. So we do this webinar, ZP Developer Zone. This welcome to the ZP vlog and podcast. So we do this vlog and podcast every Sunday at 8 a.m. London time, and we like to do it as a sort of wrap up for the news from Zimmer Peacock for this week. So let me sort of jump into it. So this week's been a pretty intense week because we've been, at least a couple of us have been in Chicago. And actually a couple of us have also been in San Francisco. And I realize that I don't have the San Francisco updates on here, but I will discuss the Chicago. So one of the updates from Zimmer Peacock is obviously one of the sort of key aspects of any kind of company that does services and projects. And really a key aspect of any business really is project management. So at Zimmer Peacock, I think one of our strengths is actually project management. There's a lot of systems in place around the tracking of tasks and the tracking of projects and the tracking of time. And so, as I say, project management is a sort of big thing at ZP. And we also have a kind of unique style of project management as well. That there are lots of ways of working as a team. You can have in project management what they call the waterfall, the scrum, or the agile. Now, when we analyze the way we do projects, because we do projects that are fundamentally scientific, we find that we end up having to do a hybrid form of project management. Now, the reason I say that is this, that when you do a project, sometimes things like building a bridge can be fairly deterministic. You kind of know what you're going to get at the end of it, which is a bridge. But when you're doing science, especially science that involves essentially moving molecules around and transforming molecules into one other form of molecule, it's really not as deterministic. How you get there in the end, there could be several routes to how you get there, and you take the route that sort of essentially gets you there within the time that's allocated, the budget that's allocated, and also gives you the product that you want at the cost point that let's say the client requires. So I say all that because we can't have just a deterministic project management style, and therefore our style is, because it's non-deterministic, is better suited to a form of project management called agile. In an agile project management system, you do a piece of work, you then sort of review that piece of work, and then you decide the next piece of work. And so you're not having these long project timelines. You actually have sort of a almost week by week timeline. Now, what we end up doing is, because we overall have an overall project goal, which is to get something done in 18 months, for example, we end up having a sort of hybrid between waterfall and agile. So we'll have waterfall, which is overall the project goals, but how we achieve them within on a sort of weekly basis, or how we get towards it, is actually agile. And we do have this actually really sort of laid out and documented, so it's not as you can imagine, some sort of random event for us. No, it's definitely planned out. So we have a very distinctive project management style at Zimmer Peacock. We call it a hybrid, and it's really it's the macro project view that waterfall gives you, but when you dig down into the details, we're having to act more like agile, and it's because, as I say, science is not deterministic like a pure engineering project would be. So, jumping in a bit more, something else that we've put out there this week as well. This is, as I say, I don't have any updates, though we were in San Francisco this week, and I will put some news out about San Francisco next week. But related to that, at Zimmer Peacock, we've also been talking about biosensors for sports and for athletes. And so, we've been highlighting that we do have all these sort of essentially biosensors. We have our continuous glucose monitoring, we have our sweat analysis, we have our glucose sensors, our lactate sensors, our testosterone sensors, our cortisol sensors. So we do have a lot of technology that is suitable for monitoring the status of athletes. And, even though at Zimmer Peacock, our ISO 13485 status says, okay, you guys are certified or qualified to work on medical devices. We can also translate these skills over to other applications. And I think, once upon a time we would have so many inquiries about measuring the lactate for athletes, and now it's broadened even more. So it is an area that we're interested in. It's an area that we do support, which is monitoring athletes for biochemical markers so they can sort of understand their performance. As I say, I don't have any updates from San Francisco, but we were at a conference called Wearable Technologies in San Francisco. But if you're following along on the vlog at the moment, I'm showing a picture of NITI, because we were at the AACC, the American Association for Clinical Chemistry, this week. I mean, this is a fairly large conference. I'm not sure how many vendors are there, but maybe something like sort of more than 300. And you get a good turnout. It's interesting because if you contrast this with Medica is kind of like AACC, but I don't think it's ridiculous to say it feels like 10 times, maybe more times bigger than that. But so we went to AACC. It's one of the biggest conferences in the US for people interested in doing things like IVDs, in vitro diagnostics, and biosensors, and we were there talking about our technology. Now we also did on Thursday at 8 a.m. London time, we always do our webinar for our CP Developer Zone. Now this week I actually had to start the webinar early, so most people who then logged on at the usual time would have found that the conference was already on. It had to happen because unfortunately we were in such a different time zone that we couldn't make the normal 8 a.m. Time zone start or work rather. But we talked about glucose sensing, we talked about osmolarity for dry eye. We did talk about measuring pH in cattle. We also talked about pH sensors in the biopharmaceutical industry, and we also asked some questions on the hypervalue electrodes. I think my favorite question from the week was measuring pH in cattle. The inquirer wanted to measure pH for 5 years in the rumen of cattle. I just thought that's such a... Is it doable? Yeah, it's doable, but has it's the quality of the signal after 5 years would be one of my concerns. And then we had some nice questions about our hypervalue electrodes, in that they'd been cleaning the hypervalue electrodes with sulfuric acid, and I think essentially sort of they were dissolving silver, and it was coating upon the working electrode. So we were happy to get those questions, and we're as always happy to answer them in the form of a webinar. And of course we will have another webinar this Thursday at 8 a.m. London time. So if you have any technical questions for Zimmer Peacock, again, don't hesitate to reach out. We always answer them in our webinar. And I did start the conversation today about project management. I talked about essentially our project management style, and I just put a video out on YouTube. And I know a lot of you subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's quite useful because we do put a lot of material out in the video format. But the video I put out there last night was really just talking about the diversity of, let's say, skills and aspects that we have to cover in these kind of projects. So I talked about regulatory compliance, that if you're doing a project for biosensors in vitro diagnostics, you almost have to start with a regulatory. People always treat it as a sort of secondary thing, but really you have to start with it. And these days, in this modern day, you do need an EQMS, an electronic quality management system. So though I didn't discuss it, I just touched upon the fact that you do need this kind of EQMS. A part of regulatory really is also you kind of have to know where all your sort of scientific lab data is. And so at Zimmer Peacock, we do have something called the Julie database, which allows us to visualize and analyze our data. I talked earlier on about our project management style at Zimmer Peacock. And I said that it's a mixture between waterfall and sprint, but we also have our Gantt charts and dashboards. We are monitoring these projects, seeing what our sort of efforts are and where our progressions are. Now, when we do our, and I said sprinted, or I should have said agile. Now, we also have, because the reason I say agile now is because at ZP we do have a software development team, and we do have a good strength in API, application programming interface. And so we've borrowed from the software development team, because we also have within our project management systems agile, which is it's used a lot. The agile project management style is used a lot in software. Something that's really important in project management is time tracking and budget control. So we're really good at time tracking at Zimmer and Peacock. We do have a online cloud system that we use. I mean, I use it, every day, just to know how much effort you have to put in. And so for an average month, I know that, because I love doing what I do, I end up doing like 300 hours a month. But I know it because of this time tracking system. We do have a whole stack of technologies for rapidly getting people to market. And so within our project management system, we have ZP Accelerator, which is the screen printed electrodes, the electronics, the cloud system. So we have all that as a platform upon which we then sort of, develop other people's technologies. Now, something we don't talk about too much is, but each project you do when you're making a biosensor and IVD, you have a really an important part called industrial design. And this is really looking, and there's sometimes I should say industrial / product design, looking at how this should look, looking at the kind of user features that this requires. And so we do have something called industrial design. Now, something that makes us, most people know us for our electrochemical biosensors. And so we do have that obviously as part of the project. It's one of the things that makes us kind of unique. Something that we don't talk about too much is actually graphic design. At ZP, we do have graphic designers. If you follow us on LinkedIn, you sometimes see some. If I put out a post, then I've done the graphic. But when you see really nice graphics, you can see that actually there are some professional people within the organization as well. Part of the EQMS, we also have to do document control and online storage of documents. When you're doing this kind of work, knowing where all your documents are, especially when you've got a larger team, is really important. Something that's quite unique to us is we have what we call aseptic manufacturing. We can manufacture things in clean rooms and keep the bioburden below measurable limits. And this is really important when you're doing transdermal and implantable sensors. Part of our, we have a cloud team, we have a software team, and we also have an AI team, an artificial intelligence team. So AI has been a really useful tool over the last few years it really helps accelerate the development of calibration curves that we would have done in a sort of traditional manner once upon a time. But with the advent and the power of AI algorithms, we can do our sort of maths calibrations or calibration of signal much more efficiently. And then finally, something that makes us stand out. We talk a lot about electronics in the vlogs and podcasts, but we do have a very strong electronics team at Zimmer and Peacock as well. So we did put a video out about that just yesterday. So this week is a little bit shorter, and that's because we've primarily been in Chicago. Personally, myself and a colleague, we flew out on Monday. We were there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and flew back on Friday. So it's been a bit of an intense week. So if I was to summarize this week, we've put out some information about project management, both our style, which we describe as a mix between waterfall and agile. We've also put out a lot about our wearable sensors, especially in the athletics region. And I will put some news out next week about our trip to San Francisco. As I say, we were at AACC this week. We did do our developer zone this week, and we talked about glucose, dry eye, pH, and the hypervalue electrodes. And then finally, we talked about the resources that we bring to a project, and those resources, quality systems, the engineering itself, the biosensors, user experience. These are all important things. So thank you for following the vlog and podcast for this week. I do appreciate it. If you have any questions of Zimmer Peacock, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You will find us. We do a webinar every Thursday, 8 a.m. London time, which is all for the technical questions. So otherwise, have a good week and speak to